theater of the absurd is the last term that we'll be discussing today. The term is used to characterize the work of a number of European and American dramatists of the 1950s. As the term suggests, the function of such theater is to give dramatic expression to the philosophical notion of the absurd. Now, I could talk about the absurd with reference to the common understanding of absurd that we have, but that is a question that you have to resolve yourself, by reading the text on your own. This based on Camus' essay that has a great impact, according to Eslin. That had a great impact on the theater of the absurd artists. Camus' essays, The Myth of Sisyphus. So it's a term that suggests that there is an expression of the absurd. So Myth of Sisyphus and Camus, they talk about that this life is meaningless. Apparently, they talk about it, that life is meaningless, and it is meaningless to find its meaning. To some extent, you can say that. Or whether he talks about it or not, it is how it was perceived. Okay. So this is the term which was used by Martin Eslin. He wrote the book named The Theatre of the Absurd, in which he introduced the term and the dramatist he associates with this term. So he writes that this is a book on a development in the contemporary theatre, the type of drama associated with the name of Samuel Beckett, Eugene Ionesco, Arthur Admov, Jean Genet, and number of other avant-garde writers in France, Britain, Italy, Spain, Germany, the United States, and elsewhere. So he actually combines the trades. There were different people writing in different places, and they were writing about different issues. So he is the one who actually associates all of them, and they combines it into one term called the theatre of the absurd. So the prominent name that is there is Samuel Beckett, and this is his play Waiting for Godot, a scene from there. As you can see that in this play, we have two major characters, Estragon and Vladimir. Many of you must have read it already. And the two people who are there, they're Lucky and Pozzo. Pozzo is the master, Lucky is the servant. Estragon and Vladimir, they are waiting somewhere, some evening, sometime. So that is how the play has been introduced. So it's a tragicomedy in 2 acts, and the play does not have a definite time. Okay, Waiting for Godot is the name of the play, and that waiting involves time, but very interestingly, the play does not have that time. It is some days, some evening, somewhere. That is how it begins. So I'll just be reading. I won't tell you the story of it because it is not famous for its story, and also we have taken a lot of time. So I'll just give you some references from the text. That the text is about waiting for Godot. There are two people, Estragon and Vladimir, who are waiting for Godot. That the play begins with let's go, and they do not move, and there's nothing to be done. That is how the play begins. And they say that let's go, the other one say that let's go, but both of them do not move. So what is said and what is being done, they are very different, and that is what gives the first sense of absurdity. Although when you read the deeper the deeper sense of it, then it will make more sense. I just read some passages from the text. Estragon says, let's go. Vladimir says, we can't. Estragon says, why not? Vladimir says, we are waiting for Godot. Estragon says despairingly, as if he doesn't know. Okay. So this is how the conversation takes place. Much of it apparently will not make sense unless you read it thoroughly. There is one statement which is very famous statement by Estragon that he says, both Estragon and Vladimir, they are clowns. So Estragon says that nothing happens, nobody comes, nobody goes, it's awful. Vladimir says that we wait, we are bored. No, don't protest. We are bored to death. There is no denying it. Good. A diversion comes along, and what do we do? We let it go to waste in an instant. all will vanish and we'll be alone once more in the midst of nothingness. So at times you will see very philosophical lines are there. At times you will see that very like absurd lines are there in terms of like, let's go, and they do not move. I am sad, I am happy. So very broken statements are there. At times the statements are very childish, not childish, but childlike, in the sense that how children speak, that Didi go come, and like that. So they speak in that manner. They are waiting for Godot. They don't know where till when they will be waiting. They don't know whether Godot will come or not. They in one instance, Stragon and Vladimir, they're talking about waiting, and they say that Godot said that he will come on a Sunday. So we are waiting. So it was asked that whether it's a Sunday, and he says, I don't know. So you can see that various things, they are going on in a very different manner. Lucky and Pozzo enter the stage. Pozzo is the master, Lucky is the servant. Lucky does as Pozzo demands, although Lucky is well read. So when Pozzo says get up, he gets up. When Pozzo says sit down, he sits down. And when Pozzo says that you think, he starts thinking. So when Pozzo says that you start thinking aloud, then this is what he thinks. And we have a long sequence, a long speech by Lucky, okay, which apparently again will not make any sense. But when you read, like, given the existence as uttered forth in the public work of puncture and what manner the personal god, qua qua qua, with white beard, qua qua qua. So this is how it writes. Two whole pages of such a speech is given. This is a long speech. And in between, fragments will make some sense. Waiting for Godot is again one text that I would ask all of you to read if you are interested in literature. Now, Eugene Ionesco and his work Rhinoceros, they are also categorized as theater of the absurd. Rhinoceros is a play about metamorphosis of humans into rhinoceros. So there are humans who are converting into rhinoceros. This can be classified as an allegorical play. You can see that in the play, all the people, they are prey to false logic. When somebody informs that people are turning into rhinoceros, very false logic is given, that what shape it was, whether it had two horns or one horn, and things like that. So false logic and the world gradually adapts to the false logic of it. When everybody is turning rhinoceros, the situation is apparently absurd. It is shown as a disease, which is gradually going on, and it is spreading like wildfire. There's a group of people who decide that they will remain human. Okay, they have this idea that they'll remain human. Everybody is tempted to turn into rhinoceros, because gradually everybody is turning, and we have this tendency to become what everybody is becoming, to do what everybody is doing. So everybody is tempted to turn into rhinoceros despite their initial commitment to remain human. But only one character remains human till the end, although towards the end he also contemplates to become rhinoceros. So apparently again this is a very absurd situation. You will see people falling, you will see people turning with thick skin, and you will see that people are turning into rhinoceros, and then you will see that the play ends without any conclusion. Okay, although it leaves you with a lot of thought. At times you will see that Brechtian idea of alienation effect and epic theater, they are also used for evoking this kind of tendency in the audience to think that they are alienated from what is going on, rather they can rationalize what is going on. The characteristics of absurd theater is they are that the situation, you will see that where it begins and where it ends, it's usually the same. Okay, the situation mostly remains static, does not change much. So if it begins with waiting, it will end with waiting. If it begins with rhinoceros, people turning into rhinoceros, it will end with that. But in between, it will expand. So it will not have a linear motion, rather it will be expanding. So there will be different situations which will come, different arguments which will come. That is what happens in Waiting for Godot as well. So in between Waiting for Godot, there are these people that are thinking in terms of committing suicide. that we are bored, let's commit suicide. In between waiting for Godot, they are hungry. In between waiting for Godot, Pozzo and Lucky come. In between waiting for Godot, they want to rescue Lucky. In between waiting for Godot, Lucky and Pozzo, they come again, but differently, where Pozzo becomes blind and Lucky is also there. So you see that the situation remains static, but it expands. When you are reading the play or when you are watching the play, it is difficult to understand the difference between facts and fancy, because when it is turning to facts, when it is turning to fancy, it is very difficult. Time and space are flexible. As I said, that waiting for Godot begins somewhere, sometime, some evening, something like that it begins. And it apparently deals with defeat, despair, fear, and death. So with this, I end my lecture. I hope that all the terms, they are clear to you. These are the references I have used for this lecture. The text, obviously, and the history books. And there are certain online references also, which I have used. So love and harmony to everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Richa, for very beautifully and content-wise with explanations, explaining the various schools of thoughts and the movements. And I'm sure the participants have highly benefited from this lecture. Now, may I request the participants, you can unmute yourself or type in the chat box to put forward any questions if you have. You can raise your hand and I can unmute you. You can directly ask a question if any. This is a very important age that Dr. Richa has taught today. I mean, very important movements that she was teaching today. Most of it are there prescribed in master syllabus, and I'm sure some are a little difficult to gauge. Please raise your hand in the chat box. You can raise your hand.
Thank you so much for your beautiful remarks.
Yeah, we have a question by Agnamitra Roy, and the question is, did the sensi serve as an inspiration for The Stranger by Camus in any manner?
I am not sure about this, so I won't answer this question. Although this was inspired by Les Saucy of Shelley, but I don't know whether it has inspired The Stranger by Camus. So I'm sorry, I won't be able to answer this question.
May I now request Lauren, please put forward your question.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, sir. Good evening, ma'am. This session was filled with so many nonsensical terms, but ma'am, your lecture added sense to all these absurd terms. So my first question is that regarding the beat generation. Are there any points of difference between beat generation and that of lost generation?
Lost generation and beat generation. I am not sure of this question also.
And ma'am, at one point where you were discussing the theater of cruelty, so while I was going through it, then I came across a point where I read that the English dramatists, they were not very much affected by this theater of cruelty. So I was just curious to know that why was it? Since it was so much influential for French dramatists, why not the English?
So as you can see that the theater of cruelty is talking about the cruelty, right? And you can see that where the colonization is coming from, and you can also see who are the colonized subjects. So don't you think that people who are in the authority or who are the colonizers, they won't be affected much by such things? And there will be places where the freedom movement is taking place, where people are talking about liberty, fraternity, and equality, like France. They will be affected more by such things. And as I said, that theater of cruelty was not able to inspire many people when he was alive. So later on, he inspired many people and many genres in drama. I mean, not many genres, but many ways of dramatic expression.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Compelled to explore this age more.
Yeah, please explore it. It's very interesting, actually. Ghanishta asked that what makes a modern text different from a postmodern text, as more or less the elements of modern and postmodern texts are similar, except the timeline. Yes, Ghanishta. So it's a very important question that you have asked. Uh, Modern and postmodern, I had also highlighted this during my lecture that both of this evolved at the same time. Okay. So temporally, as you are pointing out, that except the timeline, that post-World War is known as postmodern. Except that, there are several elements which are very similar in modern and postmodern, that is recognition of fragments. One major difference is that those fragments are mourned at in modernism, and the same fragments are celebrated in postmodernism. I give this example very often that when in a classroom, when a teacher is speaking and the audience, the students, they are silent, it is a very orderly atmosphere. Okay, when the students start speaking, it becomes chaotic for the teacher, but it becomes an opportunity for the students. Okay, they are speaking, so it's an opportunity for them to speak. It is chaotic for the person who is in the authority, who is the teacher. So when I'm talking from the point of the teacher, the authority, then it is chaotic. That is modernism. Okay, that is how modernists would look at the world, as chaotic. And when it is from the other side, it will be seen as opportunity. Okay, so that is the major difference. The other difference is that modernism and postmodernism, modernism tries to, when it recognizes the fragments, it tries to establish an alternative through experimentation. Okay, that is what we saw in terms of avant-garde movement. But when it comes to postmodernism, they don't try to establish an alternative. Rather, they are not representing the reality. Rather, they are presenting the reality. So that is also another difference between modernism and postmodernism. In representation, it is representation. That is, somebody else is presenting from a different point of view. In postmodernism, we are writing from different petty narratives, the smaller narratives which are there from different corners. We are writing that. So these are the major differences between modernism and postmodernism. Although there are many more differences, it will require another lecture, to highlight those. But I wanted to highlight these two major issues where people get confused between modernism and postmodernism, because more or less the time period is also the same.
May I now request Punu? I don't exactly know your full name.
It's Pooja. It's Pooja. Probably because of my email ID, it is written like that.
Yeah. So Pooja, please go ahead with your question.
Hope I'm audible.
Yes, please.
First, thank you so much, Richa ma'am. It was really an encouraging and amazing lecture. You have covered all the points, and every point was really amazing, and it was really nice looking into the whole aspect of modernism and postmodernism. So ma'am, my question is, in absurdity, every text has this fundamental basis. Everywhere it is said that Camus' text, Myth of Sisyphus, is the foundation for every absurd literature. So now my question is, ma'am, in Camus' text, there is one fundamental aspect that more or less he, if I'm right, that first step an individual probably must take is to accept the absurdity. I mean, in Camus' text, he asserts this fact that one must first accept the absurdity, and the very basic argument which he has provided in the text is that suicide is not only a possible response. The alternative is to rebel by rejoicing in the act of rolling the boulder up the hill. So he is basically trying to probably convey the idea that whatever is the absurd situation, first one must accept it, and second is to take pride, or not pride, take rejoice in that action. Unlike this argument, which was a positive note in his text, all the major texts, be it by, let's say, Waiting for Godot or any other playwright, I always see a challenge. The characters are not happy with the situation. They are always in a struggle. A tussle is always going on. They are probably creating an alternative space every now and then. So how do you see this, and how to see us how to see this shift from the major argument given in the text of Camus and the representation in the absurd literature.
Okay, so I got your question, and it's a question of research more than information. But there are certain points that I would like to highlight. First of all, I don't think that these absurdist artists, the people like Beckett and Ionesco, they anywhere say that they are inspired by Camus. It is Martin Esslin who says that they are inspired by Camus. And Martin Esslin talks about it from his perspective. And obviously, as you rightly pointed out, that he takes up one passage from Myth of Sisyphus, which is the struggle. Okay, he does not take the other passage that you are hinting at. And that's why it is not something which we have to always, take into consideration. They are necessarily inspired by Myth of Sisyphus. That was Esslin's idea, that they were inspired by Myth of Sisyphus. They might not be inspired by that, and it is he who has talked about it. As far as the struggle is concerned and disturbance in the character's life is concerned, I would like to raise a question, that is the character disturbed, or are the audience getting disturbed because of the characters? As you are aware of Harold Pinter and his plays, and we are aware of Samuel Beckett and Waiting for Godot. We are aware of Rhinoceros. So when people are tempted to become rhinoceros, is it the characters who are only struggling, or is it the audience who is struggling? That's a very major question to ask when we are reading the absurd theater, because that is the major purpose that we can see by using this alienation effect, that we are trying to show that the audience must think that why everybody is willing to become the other, why everybody is joining the race to become rhinoceros, why people are contemplating to become like everybody else, right? Why we are waiting, why that wait doesn't end. So it is the audience which is at the same time being provoked. So I would not see this genre as very character-centric genre. Rather, as we know that it has developed in late 1950s, and reader response theory has also developed, during that time. So it is something where we find that the audience is more important than the characters. So whenever you see that there are cases of incest, when you see that there are cases of violence, when you see that there are cases of injustice, like Estragon and Vladimir, when they are talking about like they beat me last night, were the same people. This is a conversation which is going on between Estragon and Vladimir, and we are disturbed that is he being beaten up by the same people every day. So we are reminded of the struggle of everyday life. So that is how I would perceive it. We don't have to necessarily go by the term, because I have a serious objection to the term absurd. Whatever is not understood by people is often categorized as absurd, and that is how Esslin had categorized these people of different places, including Germany, France, US, UK, everywhere. So no, we don't have to abide by what is told about it by Esslin. Rather, be the first reader of the text, and you yourself say, what is more absurd? Okay, what is more absurd? Whether waiting is more absurd, or any well-made play which was written before it, whether that was more absurd. Like I'll give you this example of this novel, Pamela, that is the beginning of the novel. So how do you see Pamela? How do you see justice in Pamela? Marrying your own rapist, is it justice? So absurdity can be seen from different perspectives. So I would request you to read it from the point of view of a reader, and not necessarily from the point of view of a critic called Martin Esslin.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. And I like this idea that readers are really more they take it in a way that we are unsettled. We think it that this is probably something we cannot take it. But even in Rhinoceros as well, the last character who is left out, he's also tempted to go with the flow. So that is what was a bit disturbing and challenging for me, that if the situation,
same time, wasn't that very optimistic also, that he is the one who is contemplating, but till the end, he does not become rhinoceros. So probably there's one human who will be left at the end. Okay, so probably humanity will save itself. So there is this possibility, right? So postmodernism leaves that kind of, this theater leaves that kind of possibility, that waiting will continue, maybe that will end in some kind of culmination. Okay, maybe that person is only contemplating, will not become a rhinoceros. Prabhat Jha is asking that on the level of pedagogy, we are always inclined towards discussing plot and characters and conflict while teaching a play. How shall we understand or teach postmodern drama then? Pedagogy is very different for different teachers. So according to me, like how I want to talk about postmodern drama is to talk about, first of all, from because postmodernism is about Beckett narrative. So which part of the small narrative it is coming from? So we can discuss the plot, character, and conflict, but we have to discuss it in plural. We have to discuss it in terms of plots, different plots of different people, characters, and from different points of view. So it is not one, we are shifting our focus from one to many, from bigger narrative, great narrative, grand narrative to the Beckett narrative. So I think that is how we have to teach. That is how I would prefer to teach postmodern drama or any other thing, which is postmodern. Sudham Das says ma'am and says nothing after that.
Yeah, he's in the process, I guess. But before that, I think there is a question by Priti Chaudhary, and Priti says that the poem of Burroughs that you mentioned, is it in any way could be an exemplar of concrete poetry?
It can be an example of concrete poetry. It cannot be an example of concrete poetry. But the idea is that it is breaking free from the established poetic norms. So that is the major idea, Priti, that I could understand in Burroughs' poems. I could not understand the poem entirely when I was trying to read it, but I could see that it is breaking free from the established pattern of poetry. How it is coming. At times, these writers, they used to write these poems on toilet sheets. So they would write it and write it and write it and compile it into poems. So I don't know whether we can very well call it concrete poetry. We may not, but it is completely breaking free from the established norms. Stream of consciousness and rhythm, the sense of rhythm had a major impact on these writers, more than any other form, like which was established.
Right. A basic difference between modern and postmodern.
Just said that. Yeah.
You have to, that has been discussed, and you can just read few books on that. These are very basic ideas. Richa also talked about it.
You read Lyotard. Yeah, you read Lyotard first, because he talks about, in his essay, what is postmodern, he begins it with avant-garde movement, and he talks about the difference between modern and postmodern. So I would ask you to read Lyotard for this basic understanding between modern and postmodern.
Right. So with that, we come to the conclusion of a very enriching session. I'm sure everyone enjoyed it. We thoroughly enjoyed your session, Dr. Richa, and it's always a pleasure to have you on this platform. On behalf of Team Darth Voyage, we are really thankful, honored. See you soon again on this platform. Take care. Good night.
Thank you so much for having me here. It is always enriching for me as well. And I'm sorry that I could not answer some of your questions. I would like to read those aspects as well. Thank you for asking those questions, which I could not answer. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you. Good night. Bye.